They've heard everything you said to a great degree, concede that the times are tough, but boy, do they believe in themselves, and purely on optimism, they think they're going to get through. And I want to put to either of you a response to that, either Binta or Keith.
So
Binta Brown.
I think optimism is awesome. And I think that when you look at the level of optimism for Generation X, when we were the very same age as you guys are now, was actually equal to your level of optimism. Optimism is not something that's lost upon the young, right? We expect the young to be optimistic. And I hope that you keep your optimism. David, I hope that you keep your pragmatic idealism, as you've written about. But the practical reality is that as people grow older and as their responsibilities increase and as they do take on mortgages and have families and have additional constraints, the ability to service that optimism in every generation or over the course of history, it decreases, right? I hope that's not the case for millennials, but it's not anything special when you compare it to other generations, unfortunately.
Okay, that's the point. David, in other words, your opponents are saying they've heard it before.
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at the context of the circumstances. You know, the hand at which Generation X was dealt, and there is a parallel. It's actually a little bit higher among millennials than it was among Generation X. But if you consider that in terms of the context, as I mentioned earlier, I think that's what's really important. That you would expect in the worst job market in history, you would expect in the face of huge unemployment and a terrible economic climate, that the natural tendency would be for people to be incredibly not optimistic about their own economic future. But what's even more interesting is that people are optimistic about their situation at the moment, not just about their future and what's ahead. And I think that that's really what's particularly striking about it.
Can we just talk about
Let me bring Keith in to respond to that. Keith, do you prefer W. Keith in references or Keith?
Keith is good.
Okay, because when I first ran by you with Keith, a big voice in my head said, "Say W." Before his name. And so I didn't know if I had to W all night or not.
There are a lot of Keith Campbells out there, and I've gotten hate mail for some of them for cloning
Oh, you don't want
sheep.
that.
So
all right,
I try to
W it
avoid
is.
That. Yeah.
So Keith, respond to your opponent.
Optimism is fine. I'm not as big a fan. I'm a little more of a fan of self-control and sort of effectively moving towards goals rather than global optimism. I don't know if we're seeing that. I don't know. I don't know if there's data on, are people saying, look, I'm in trouble, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to get out of trouble, or are they kind of moving into something else to get away from it? I just don't know the answer to that.
Jessica?
I would say we are effectively moving towards goals. I mean, it was mentioned that millennials are putting off marriage and family, and that in large part is because women have flooded into the workforce and have higher levels of educational attainment, and that's why it might seem like immaturity if you don't actually talk to millennials and look at the statistics. They are putting off these things not out of a sense of immaturity, but because they do want all of their ducks in a row. They're planning for these things. That planning takes longer, and I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, all of the studies show that older parents are better parents, so I just don't see how that's a cause for alarm. That's a cause for celebration.